you could summarize, sort of the tips that you've shared so far, with our audience, so they get something to walk away with. What would you, say to someone who maybe is at your rock bottom where you were at that time? How can they, figure out a way to move forward? What do you think would be their next step?
I think that's a really, really good question, and I know everybody's a little bit different, but I think that the baseline is, number one, whether it's your fault or not, spending your energy blaming the circumstance or somebody else doesn't do you any good. It doesn't change anything except for it keeps you where you're at. And so to change that and say, okay, fine, even if it's not my fault, what can I do to change myself so that I'm not in this situation? And there's a little bit of resolve. You're gonna have to kind of let some things go. And there's a little bit of okay, this might be a long journey, but you know what? It's better than the alternative, which is staying here. And I think that's huge first step. Second step, I had to, for me, not only start to surround myself with people that thought differently, that didn't blame others, that saw things as challenges, but I also had to be careful what I watched on TV. What kind of music did I listen to? What was influencing me? How much news was I reading? Like, all of those things are neither good nor bad, but if they suck you into this spiral, then you have to say, okay, I can't listen to this music anymore. I need to find some motivational music. I can't watch the news anymore. Okay, maybe I'll just scan the headlines and be like, okay, I'm done, that's it. Maybe you need to take a break from those types of things that are influencing you. So no blame. Surround your thoughts with positivity, whether it's people or media or whatever it might be, like this show. And then, I know it's a cliche, and it's such a cliche, but it's don't give up. It seems like my mantra lately has been, whatever decision you make is the right one. If you make those decisions consciously to say, I'm going to get better, I'm not going to blame others, I'm going to surround myself with the right people. Maybe you make a choice and you go to an organization and you're like, oh, these are not the right people. It's not a wrong choice. It just means now you know, and now you make another choice. And you keep making choices and you keep moving forward, and you celebrate those little victories, because eventually you look back and go, oh my gosh, 7 years ago I was almost homeless. Look how far I've come. Wow. And then realize, because when you start to see those little steps of hope, then you go, oh my gosh, I've gone from here to here. There's nothing to prevent me from going to here, to here, to here, to here. And it's almost like an exponential growth, because you start to see where you've come from. And now you have the confidence to know where you're going. And you might change. My business has shifted a few times over the last 4 years before I kind of landed on what I really felt my purpose. And I know that my purpose for now is this. 5 years, it might be different. But if you keep moving forward, you keep getting the confidence. It's so hard, because it is like rolling that boulder up the hill. When you first start, you get this boulder and you're like,
so tough.
I can't do it. But if you do it and find others to help you, you get there.
Wonderful.
I think the things that helped me, or the tips that I would give your listeners, is to find kind of those little areas that you can kind of buy back some sense of agency over, and just decide what that is to you, and then really draw a boundary around that thing, if it's important to you. And if you have a partner or a roommate or friends or family around you and supporting you, like, clearly communicate to them, like, this thing is important to me. I know it may seem silly, but I just really need to make sure that our bed is made every day, or I just really need to make sure that, I know that we're going to have this consistent coffee date, or whatever it is, right? Or like, our family's going to do a family phone call, every Saturday morning, or whatever it is, just to have that consistency to your life when everything feels like it's changing, or nothing is very solid, or that you can count on it. So I would say that would be definitely a tip. Also, it seems kind of so nebulous to say just like practice letting go, but really taking some time to reflect and evaluate on what is important and what's not important, and kind of choosing your battles. I know even in my marriage, trying to evaluate some of the things, like if there's a little annoyance or a little, kind of a tension point around even something silly about our daily routine, really thinking about, is this something that's worth bringing up or worth turning into maybe a larger conversation, or should I just let it go? And then also maybe sometimes I would even err on the side of that too much, and then I would find myself being resentful later. And so just really clearly communicating, like asking for what I needed, like I really need us to do X or Y or Z, right? See, I had to think about that. X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, right? And just things like that. It doesn't feel very fun or romantic to always to ask for what you need, but it's so important. And then that person can then respond and feel like they know how to best support you in a time of transition. I know it's been hard for my husband to watch me navigate all of these changes, because he feels like there's not much that he can do to help or to support, because it's not things that he can control either, right? And so I definitely being really self-reflective about that kind of letting go process. It's not, it's kind of almost a platitude that we tell, like, oh, you just need to let it go. Well, especially for someone with a personality like me, or maybe you, who like to plan and like to kind of know what's going on, that's not easy, and it seems very vague. Like like I need something concrete. Like, well, how do I let it go? How do I
we
practice
don't work
that?
well in chaos.
Yes, absolutely. So just prioritizing the things that really are important and matter, and the other things that ideally, in an ideal situation, I would be able to control this a little bit more, but this thing I'm just going to kind of let go. I think
so recognizing it's temporary.
Yes, absolutely.
Putting it within that context of, you know what, this is temporary. It'll get back to normal, eventually, hopefully soon. And I think, sort of what I'm hearing from you, and, sort of keywords that I'm hearing is consistency, making sure that, you create some consistency in the chaos, making sure that you're communicating well with your partner, if you have a partner or someone in your space, and sort of that sense of letting go, recognizing what you can't control, and being able to let go of that and recognize that things are temporary.
And cut yourself some slack. I think that's huge. Self-compassion. I've actually probably within the last 6 weeks instituted a new practice. My husband and I usually talk about something that we're grateful for right before bed, but we added in now a gold star. We give ourselves a gold star, and it's just a daily practice of self-compassion. Like, what did I do today? Not like what did I accomplish so much as, maybe what did I let go, or what did I how did I give myself a little grace or a little self-compassion, cut myself a little slack? And that's been an important practice for me in the last several weeks, because I can be really hard on myself. And to just acknowledge that the last several years have been hard, and there's been a lot of change and not a lot that stayed the same or was consistent. And so to give myself a little credit for that. I think, in this age of, we talk about self-care all the time, and it's the treat yourself kind of era, right?
Of course.
But I think a way of treating yourself sometimes is to just give yourself a little compassion, right? I think sometimes those treats can delve into an unhealthy area, right? Like, you don't want to be eating ice cream every single night.
Oh, definitely not.
You might want to, but you probably shouldn't.
I know. Sure, butter pecans.
Yes, yeah. But I think just the sense of sometimes you just need to say, you know what? It's okay to recognize that this thing is hard, or that your brain feels tired because you're always trying to speak Canadian, or you're always, trying to find a little sense of, a solid ground in the midst of all the shifting that's been going on. And just to recognize that even though, yes, things are going well, and I'm keeping it all together, it's okay to feel like it's hard to keep it all together, or all this change has been challenging, and to just recognize that, I think, is really important. So I would tell your listeners, give yourself a daily gold star, take a look, reflect on your day, and say, that I could have gone down that road and gone into that argument, but I just let that thing go, or you know what, I just built in a little bit more margin. I said no to that thing. I drew a boundary here, and to just kind of recognize that and celebrate that for yourself, I think can be very helpful as you navigate a transition.
Just for the audience, if you could share just a little bit of, you know, maybe what your food intake looks like, right? Because I think we have an idea that, you know, you sort of switched from high sugar, high fat, high salt to sort of, you know, maybe the superficial, you know, artificial meats and stuff like that. It still had a lot of sodium in it. And then now you're switched to a different type. And maybe identify what that third type is, just sort of to connect the dots.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I went vegetarian and vegan long before that, and was a junk food vegetarian vegan for years, and never really figured it out because it was all of that other addiction stuff. So now I would call myself whole food plant-based.
Got it.
Okay. So by and large, I'm eating very few processed foods, like ultra processed foods. Like obviously I'll throw stuff into a blender. That's a processed food, you know, it looks different than when it came out of the ground. But what we mean by ultra processed foods are like things that undergo a significant number of additions in terms of chemicals and things to preserve it. And it really ups whether it's the sugar content or the fat content or the salt content in order, again, to preserve it, make it shelf stable, make it ultra palatable, right? We talk a lot about these things called bliss points. And so cutting all of that out, I eat 95% of my caloric intake. So not quantity of food, because you got to be careful. Like you can eat one, you know, processed food and it is, you know, a significant number of maybe my daily caloric intake. So I eat 90 to 95% of my caloric intake as whole foods and plant-based. So that means I eat no meat or dairy of any kind, and I add very little salt and sugar and almost no added processed fat. So I'll eat avocados and nuts and seeds, and I limit my intake even of those. Like I don't go crazy on them, but I eat enormous amounts of fruit. Like fruit was the saving grace to me when I was overcoming food addiction. I needed something that was something that I could still use as an emotional coping mechanism that I knew wasn't going to sabotage me. So fruit became the unlimited food. I could eat fruit as much as I like, whenever I like. And that's what I did. People used to come over to my house and I'd have a table, and it was like, if there wasn't like 9 or 10 different kinds of fruits in the middle of the table, you knew that something was wrong. Like that's just how my house was.
Your house was known for a lot of fruits. Yes.
Yeah, and so I just ate fruit like crazy, and I still do. To this day, I consume a lot of fruit, and during the day, I have at least one huge salad every day. So like where most of my plate is greens, and then I'll add some nuts or seeds to it, or I'll add some tofu or some tempeh or something like that to add some bulk, or lots of beans. I eat huge amounts of legumes. So those are the two major changes, like fruit all the time, whenever, and huge salads at least once a day.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. At least, you know, we have an opportunity to get, you know, some insight into what you're eating and sort of what contributed, you know, to your transformation. So not only was it one that you had to confront your emotions and where it was coming from, but you also had to make systematic changes to what you were eating to be able to, you know, get to the place where you are today. So it's a holistic approach, it sounds like.
Sure. I think so. I hope so. It's working.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. What tips can you give to our audience, you know, if they're going through something similar to you? They have a food addiction maybe, or they have a bad relationship to their body and to food, you know, maybe 1 or 2 tips that you could give to that person who might be listening.
Why don't I start with that second one, like yourself, like how you relate to yourself. I think it's important to notice those things. And I think there's a very big difference between living in a state of shame and sort of holding yourself accountable. I just think there's a big difference between sort of self-judgment and self-accountability. Yeah. And I needed to figure that out because the judgment was just sending me down the coping, emotional eating pathway, more like kind of hating on myself. And the accountability to, you know, wanting to live my best life and kind of recognizing what my best life wanted to be and look like and saying, I can get there. So stepping away from self-loathing and sort of stepping into the fact that change and transformation is possible, And the things that you're noticing is okay. Notice those things, but then reframe them. Reframe them outside of judgment and reframe them instead into this healthy, like goal setting or visioning, or kind of being able to perceive of what your life could look like, you know. And then on you know, on the health front, on the food front, like educate yourself. Educate yourself and be honest. Like I personally think that it's incontrovertible evidence, okay? And I think everybody, regardless of where they fall on the spectrum of the kinds of foods they incorporate, nobody's gonna tell me at all that there's not gonna be one argument, aside from maybe like people that consider themselves carnivores and all they eat is meat, like literally they don't eat fruit, they don't eat any grains, or, you know, if they're only eating meat, maybe. And that's kind of a fad right now, actually, believe it or not. There's a whole carnivore movement. But I mean, I think if you take the preponderance of scientific nutritional evidence, it'll tell you that diets that are rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes are the foundation of a healthy diet. Whether or not you continue to eat some forms of meat or some forms of dairy, or even some processed foods, if you build the bulk of your diet on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes, with some nuts and seeds, etc., like that is the foundation of a healthy diet regardless. So you can just know if you're getting the majority of your food from that, you are eating the things that lead to health. And it doesn't have to be labeled omnivore, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian. I don't care. Just whole foods. Whole foods, the way the earth created them. You know, if you do that, you're on the right path, and you're going to be eating a far healthier diet than the standard Canadian or standard American, standard Western diet. So that's a big one. Just kind of look and say, you know, be honest with yourself. Am I eating more packaged foods than I am eating, you know, foods as they come to us on a tree or in the ground? Or, you know, you got to ask yourself that. You know, am I eating more strawberry flavored things than I'm eating strawberries?
That's a good way of putting it, right? It's that you really have to, it sounds like, confront yourself on both sides, the emotional side and the physical side. You know, what is my relationship to food? And also, you know, what am I actually consuming? And then be able to, as you said, educate yourself to be able to find out, okay, what do I strategically want to achieve? And then how can I get there? So it sounds like that's
and for most people in the weight loss, like this is the evil secret to the whole sort of health industry, is everybody says get a gym pass, right? January 1st comes around at the holiday season, everybody's gained some weight, and where do they go? They go to the gym to try to. You can't outrun a bad diet. Like there are so many people, and
we're gonna put that in bold.
You just can't outrun. You can't outrun a bad diet. You can't, because most people don't realize, like, you know, how long you have to run to burn 400 calories. You have to run for like an hour at a pretty good intensity, probably, to burn 400 or 500 calories. Wow, listen, you know, you could eat half a bag of chips in 10 minutes and have that 500 calories, and that is not nutritionally like good for you. So anyways, you can't outrun a bad diet. You can't outrun a bad diet. You can't out-exercise it. It's just never going to happen.
No, I hear you. I hear you for sure.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, Karen, if you could tell us some tips, you know, for individuals out there, you know, that maybe individuals that might need the True Potential program. Let's say they're not in Toronto and they can't access it. Let's say, you know, it's just they're just watching our video and they might want a few tips. I'm not saying to give away your program here, but just maybe a few tips that could help them at least to start thinking about the idea of what they're putting, how they can access it.
I'm going to say a couple tips would be, don't let your circumstance dictate your today and your future. Right? So if it's a negative situation that you're in, try to look past it and try honestly try to see something positive in the negative situation. A lot of us find it difficult to see something positive in something negative, but there's always something positive. And if you can find what that positive is, and work towards that. And like when I lost all that money, I remember saying, basically I was like, okay, Lord, why did you allow me to do it? And you knew, that it was not going to work. And what was really placed on my heart though was that, that I needed to see exactly my potential. So even with the trade show, so I rented 30,000 square feet at the International Center. It's a large convention center in Toronto. And I rented a hall, 30,000 square feet, and I had to fill it. I ended up filling, I think it was 60 of the 100 booths, which is not bad, but it's not 100. And so anyhow, at that time, to me, that was a big deal. We had an auction at the trade show. However, with that loss and with the vision that I had for the trade show, I knew it was a large vision, but true potential is larger. So I felt that, yes, I had that loss, but it also showed me what I'm capable of doing. And so anything negative, being able to see, look at the whole thing, look at different angles. Like, okay, I have my speaker right here. Being able to look at every angle and what positive can I get out of this, and looking at every angle instead of looking at the obvious. It's so easy to look at the obvious. I lost 126,000. It's easy to look at the obvious. Look deeper. Look deeper, look beyond the surface and go from there. And so as with that's how true potential was created, because being able to look beyond that mess and drill a little deeper. And when anything terrible happens, try to find the positive and don't look beyond the surface. Look beyond the surface. What did I need to learn? What did I need to learn from the situation? And don't ever turn around and say, woe is me. It sucks. It sucks when anyone has to go through a terrible time. But see what positive you can get from it and work towards that. And don't... Okay, somebody told me this years ago, and I appreciate that. In terms of opinion, everybody has an opinion. And what she had said to me was, eat the meat and spit out the bones.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I love
unpack that a little bit for me and the audience.
Do you know what I mean? Eat the meat and spit out the bones. So I could take advice. However, to me, you kind of weigh it. Is it good for me today? It may not be good for me right now. Maybe good for me, months down, a year down the road, or it could have been good for me yesterday, but it's not good for me right now. So when anybody gives advice, don't just take it and run with it, because if it doesn't work, who are you going to blame? You can't really blame that other person. You chose to take it, so you have to take the onus is on you. So eat the meat and spit out the bones. And don't let anyone, like, okay, a favorite line that I have from me is that if somebody tells me something, and they say it's impossible, in my head, if in my head it does seem possible, I will make it happen.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So if somebody says, no, that can't, and if I strongly believe it can, I will find a way to make it happen. I find too many people are quick to give up. No, because I always say it doesn't make sense to me. If something doesn't make sense, if my head is not accepting that, then I'm not going to accept it, and I'm going to find a solution. And I mean, I remember actually, even with this workshop, the organization that I'm working with, the gentleman's like, Karen, you're persistent. I'm like, yeah. Don't give up. Do you know what I mean? Don't give up when you believe in something. And don't be afraid of hard work. We all work hard. We choose the reason why you're working hard. Like in terms of building true potential, oh yeah, I had to put in blood, sweat, and tears. But I believe in it. And so you don't give up because it's hard. I remember somebody saying to me a number of years ago on Facebook, it was my birthday, and wishing me happy birthday, and he said something about, basically it was, Karen, you don't give up. There was a negative connotation to it, and it was basically because I've been going at it with true potential. Now fast forward, he was like, Karen, it's good you didn't give up. So when you believe in something, don't be so quick to throw in the towel.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how difficult it is. If you believe in it, continue to go forward, and don't listen to the naysayers, and don't even listen to your negative chatter. If you strongly believe in it. So like when I hear somebody say, like example, somebody will reach out about multi-level marketing, and I'm not a fan of those, and I'm saying it, and I apologize to any of your audience that may be in it, but I find that with, say, a multi-level marketing, they're always selling the dream, the money that you're going to make. No, choose something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Because if you're going strictly for money, it doesn't turn around right away. You're going to throw in the towel and give up.
Yeah.
Because I know some serial MLM, multi-level marketing people, because they're going after that money. No, if you were to find something that you're passionate about, then go after it. And so it may not materialize a year, 2 years, but it will. Because success will come. Success is there for all of us, but you have to be prepared to work at it and to not give up and not give in. So don't go after money, go after something that's important to you, because then that way, once you know your why you're doing it, then as time goes by and you're getting a little closer, and then so it will come. Success, I think, I strongly believe, success it's available to everybody, but you need to understand the reason why you're going after it, and then not to give up.
The success, this is important for your viewers. There's an old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And so I don't want anybody to think that somehow I'm a self-made man, that it was just because of my own determination that I was able to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish. There were a lot of people who had their hands around me, physically in the sense of lifting me up, spiritually in the sense of prayers, that allowed me again to be able to beat the odds. Quite frankly, coming from Jane and Finch to be where I'm at right now. So the book really, again, shows the journey and shows the struggle, right? As I mentioned earlier, oftentimes we see the shiny object at the end, the suits and the car and whatever the case may be. Yes. And there's a disconnect, right? Depending on who we're talking to, because some people, especially our young folks, may not be able to see themselves in you if all you're doing is coming to them in that sort of shiny dollar piece sort of look, right? So the objective really is to show that, yes, there's that piece, but there was a journey along that piece, and it started from very humble beginnings. And so no matter where you are, whether you are in Toronto or anywhere else around the world where you are yourself are starting from humble beginnings, that don't let that be a barrier for you to achieve success the way that you define success.
Even though you went through a tough time transitioning from each country to the next, you were able to walk away with, things that you learned and how you grew. And that's sort of what transitions are all about, right? Being able to recognize how you can be resilient through that tough time. And I guess the last question I'll ask you is maybe sum up for us a few tips from, your experiences in these different places. And if you were to, tell individuals, I guess, out there who maybe, I don't know, that are like maybe inner city kids, maybe, who are not sure where they want to go, what they want to do, what would you tell them?
So for me, in terms of just traveling in general or getting to your next point, I think it's always important to be open, to be honest, to be kind. My mom always wanted me to be a bit tougher. I don't think I've gotten tougher, guys. I'm still in the world, in the eyes of the world, I'm probably still quite soft. But there's so much beauty in softness. Never lose that. You don't need to become harder and more rigid for the world to to accept you. You just need to be who you are. You know, you need to believe in yourself and be confident in what the gifts that you have and what you bring to this table. I find the openness to make all these different friends for me led to so many different opportunities. Just being kind to people, talking to people, you know, sharing, learning, growing. I think for me, that openness was a big part of me being able to go to all these different places. And just have courage. And courage doesn't mean that you'll just do everything and go everywhere and you'll just know what you're doing. You'll still be scared. You'll still be so scared, but do it anyway. And I think for me, that's how I would define courage. I'm trembling, but I'm getting on that plane. I want to pee, but I'm still sitting there freaking out, but I'm still on that bus. I'm still going on that journey, you know. All of these things that I've done, I haven't done them feeling 100% confident about every single choice or decision I've made. I've just done it anyway. I've done it no matter how scared and worried I felt. I've decided to just go ahead. And for me, I think what comforted me was just knowing that wherever I went in this world, God was always with me, you know, like I always had God with me in the back pocket. I had my Bible. My Bible has gone on a journey.
Yes, the traveling Bible.
The traveling Bible. I've had this Bible since 2004. It was a gift after I first got baptized. And this Bible has gone with me through every single transition. It has been my safety net. I've cried on it multiple times, the pages are wet, everything. It's just been my little home. So I would say definitely be open, be courageous, be kind, because it's just always nice to be kind. Believe in yourself and surround yourself with a good sense of community. I can't stress how important it is to find the right people. And to take time to know those people that you're involving in your life, because they also shape who you become. And if you surround yourself with people who want to see you grow and develop and pour good things into you and are doing good things themselves with their lives and things that you admire, you know, you define what those things are for you. But people that are doing things that you want to do, people who you can see yourself in some way, shape, or form, who inspire you to be better, who challenge you to grow, who just, you know, help you to evolve in ways that you could never expect. So I would say surround yourself with those people, and then you'll just see how much you'll blossom and bloom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shari.
That's why I created what I call the Smart Mom Path. And SMART to me stands for simple, meaningful actions repeated over time. But those actions need to be based, there's three main steps to it. They first need to be based in the first step, which is called the love foundation. And love stands for living our values every day. And so if your parenting and how you approach parenting isn't really anchored in your true values of what's important to you, what gives you meaning, it won't last. And what I've discovered is that those spirited kiddos, they actually can sniff out inauthenticity and incongruence, and they don't respect it more than other kids. And that can be a real fight or flight moments, like creating those over and over again.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing sort of you said the Smart Mom
Path.
What was that one? Path.
The
Smart Mom Path. That's great. That's such a great even takeaway, you know, wanting moms just listening, hearing the Smart Mom Path. They're like, I want to know what path this is, and I want to be able to travel down that path. Because you're right, there's so many moms that are out there that are frustrated, that are like, you know, I just want to throw in the hat right now sort of thing. And they, you know, sort of like being able to have somewhat of a structure, being able to connect with you and be able to find ways, as you said, to be loving, to, you know, to identify caring approaches that, you know, that they can take, that can help them to be able to, you know, as I said, nurture these kids that otherwise others would throw to the wayside, right?
Totally. It sounds crazy, but I actually believe that temper tantrums are a smart mom's greatest gift. Gift.
Okay, tell us about that, because I'm seriously interested.
The reason I say that is, first of all, that when you really get your path down, and because the first one I talked about is the Love Foundation, the next one is the biology boosters. It's those things that support each of us in our family of really showing up as our best in energy, in nutrition, like in all of those things, but also in connection and an understanding. So it's like, yeah, every member of my family really does have my back, really does support me. And the last one is what I call luminous parenting. And the reason I call it luminous parenting is because if you're not using child discipline that eventually, not always, brings out your best and their best, there is something wrong. And until you're able to do that, and when you're able to do that, it's a total game changer. Because then when you have temper tantrums, then when you have meltdowns, it's like you have this confidence that we're going to get through this together even closer.
Yes.
And for me, that's what the gift is. The gift is when we're living in families and in homes where we know there can be meltdowns, we know there's transitions, we know life happens and we can't control it all. But when we go home, we're going to be cared for, we're going to be understood, and we're going to be forgiven.
Yeah.
That's where the magic happens. That's where home sweet home happens.
Yeah, that sense of belonging, like you're talking about there. So, and it sounds a little bit like, that sense of security, that we were talking about off record, but that sense of security in being able to recognize that, you have a space that you can come to, and that you can tell, these individuals who are guardians and parents, the bad stuff that happened, the good stuff that happened, and feeling like you're not going to be judged in a sense as a child. So it sounds like you're helping parents to be able to develop that safe space for their children, and, to be able to help them to be able to be healthy, to be able to provide that space, right? So it sounds like it's not just for the children, you're helping the parents to be there so they can support the children in the best way possible.
Completely. And sometimes that's supporting parents through their own transitions, right? And may I share one of the things, it's a method I use in the Love Foundation, because I feel I start there a lot and it links to transitions. So I call it the PUP method, P-U-P, which I think of it like puppies.
Yes.
When we have puppies, they are more fragile, but they're also exuberant, and they can be so lovely, but they can also be completely irritating when they've chewed your shoe to bits, or they've peed all over, and it can be all consuming. And so PUP, I use acronyms a lot, if you hadn't noticed. I've already told you 3. This is my 3rd, and I'm going to stop there, I promise.
Yes.
The first one is pause. And so when we're going through a transition, or we're faced with trauma, drama, or both, it's to pause and to figure out what's really going on, which is the second word, which is understanding. And so I think a lot of parents, and I also find teachers, totally well-meaning, I think miss this part. They might think they have it, but in terms of the understanding part, I think a lot of us, of the experts out there, can forget that child misbehavior is not the problem. It's not the problem. It's the solution to a problem that the child has found.
Wow.
And until you get that, it kind of turns things on its head. Because a lot of times you're like, yeah, well, you just do this. Why are you yelling? You shouldn't be yelling. You shouldn't, step up, stop spitting Cheerios at your sibling.
Yeah.
But that's working for them on some level. And until you really figure out what the problem is, what the purpose is behind it, how it's serving them, you can't motivate and inspire your child to change it. And so the third one, when it comes to those transitions, so PUP is, pause, understand, and then it's prepare. And the preparing is really looking at what truly is going to motivate, what's going to make the difference here to inspire someone to step up in a new way.
Yeah.
And if you can't help your child get skin in the game, if it only matters to you, it's often not enough, especially for a spirited child.
Yeah, you want to get them, as you said, active and a part, that sense of belonging again. So it's, making them a part of the solution in a sense. So not only are you pausing to sort of think, okay, what's going on here, right? You're gaining understanding to try to figure out, okay, what is this behavior serving? What are they getting out of this? Then you're also, engaging them in participation, encouraging them to say, okay, now I understand what's going on here. How can we, change this? And you're inviting them into that process, which is great.
May I give you an example of using it and how it might be used?
Sure.
Okay. So when I was working with the boys, I remember the youngest one was 6, and I would drop them off at school. And sometimes I would literally, because I was so exhausted, I would be like dropping them off and I'd be like running to my car like a prisoner, making a break for it, for freedom. And like I was that exhausted. There were times, especially if it had been a doozy of a morning, I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyways, and the kids would line up outside their classroom, and there were times, and he had his little cane, he was blind, and he would start like rapping with it. And there were times and I'd be so embarrassed because he'd be like, Nick has a very big, and I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. And he would always say this has a very big pick. And I don't know if he even knew what he was saying, but I was mortified. And, at first there was a part of me that just wanted him to change. Right? But when I finally paused, and I didn't do it right away, just so you know, I also nagged and I did all of the things you shouldn't do. I did all of it. But when I paused and I understood, I'm like, wow, he actually has a smile on his face every time he's doing it. Like, what is he getting out of it? Well, other kids around him would snicker and laugh. So, and as a blind child, he wasn't getting belonging. He wasn't feeling sense. So this is one of the ways he could connect, right? And he was also incredibly bored because standing there waiting for the classroom door to open, he was making entertainment for himself.
Yeah.
And so part of what I could then understanding was prepare for it. It's like, oh, he's really bored. Like, actually, I shouldn't bring him so early because he's just waiting there and being bored, right? And then the other thing I could do was connect with some of the other parents around at drop off time in the morning, and also kind of introduce him to some of the other kids so he could make connections there.
Oh, lovely.
But if you're coming from that top down of like, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing, half the time your child's behavior has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Like your reaction has everything to do with you. But what they're doing at first, they're often testing the waters, and the more they test it with you, and the more you're able to harness and figure out how to motivate them in positive ways to really step up and be a contributing member of the family, the better off we all are.
Practically, some things that have helped during times of transition is to lock down the morning routine. Like, lock it down. And be super selfish about it. Like, do not entertain a call. Do not entertain a partner or a spouse. Do not entertain a child or a needy dog. Like, be selfish, because it's so important to refuel. Transitions are draining. They're exhausting. And if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot give yourself a best shot. And this is something important that I've learned during transitions, is it's nobody else's responsibility to help you. You might use that language in your head of, oh, I wish they did that, or they should understand my pain. It's not. It's your responsibility to give yourself the best opportunity to step out of it. And the only way to do that is to have a good fueling or refueling station or space. And for me, I feel mornings are the best because that sets the tone for the rest of the day. And so I have the luxury now of a 90-minute morning routine, but honestly, it could be as short as 20 minutes. Honestly, 20 minutes in the morning. And for me, it has been transformational to the point that I hold on to this even when I'm not in times of transition, because it is the anchor to my day. It is the time of the day that I know I always walk out better than I walk to. Everything else may change. Some meetings do well, some business opportunities do better than others, Some relationships are more fruitful than others, but the morning routine, because it's my control and my activity, always comes out better. And so practically there are a few ingredients that I put in, and this part I'll say is negotiable. The morning routine, I'm going to say straight up, non-negotiable. If you don't have a morning routine, you're doing yourself a disservice. Do it for 30 days. You will come back as a guest on the show and be like, guys, have a morning routine. You'll be your own ambassador for it. But the negotiable part is what you do with it. So for me, I see that I'm a spiritual person, so I see the world through spiritual lens. So the first thing I say is you got to feed yourself spiritually. Yes. So for me, that's reading my Bible, that's praying, that's thinking about certain memory verses, like scriptural verses. That might be listening to worship music. So whatever faith you are from, whatever spirituality you have, give time to understanding that life is way bigger than us. It's also way bigger than this moment. And it really helps to be part of a macro story, because sometimes we can overinflate ourselves, our worth, and our need if we don't hold ourselves in perspective. And so having that spiritual lens to me is important. So feed yourself spiritually. That can be honestly as short as 5 minutes, or you can do 15 or 20 minutes, even up to 30 minutes. Second, feed yourself physically, healthy body, healthy mind, all that stuff that people tell you is true. If you do a simple workout in the morning, a couple stretches, a few push-ups and sit-ups at the very least, engage your core. There is so much scientific research, not only of how that actually jumpstarts a lot of stuff in your body, making your body a better machine during the day, but also certainly activates your mind. So we're talking better focus, we're talking about better energy, we're talking about really using more of your potential than you thought you could. So to me, that's the second part. I get about 40 minutes in the morning of a workout, sometimes even up to an hour, but at the very least, I would say 10 to 15 minutes of some stretching instead of some push-ups, even if that would be huge. So feed yourself spiritually, feed yourself physically. I would say feed yourself emotionally. So I do not look at social media in the morning. I do not read the news, because both of those affect me emotionally and affects everybody. And if you think it doesn't affect you, you're in denial. So switch those things off. But I also have what I call the inner circle, a group of friends that I know always have my best interests at heart. And because I'm always traveling, we leave each other voice notes. So I will listen to one of their voice notes, and it engages me at an intimacy level that social media just can't feed, or at least doesn't feed well. And here in India, where I'm right now, I have breakfast with my parents, but the same thing. You know, my parents are incredible people. They have been my longest supporters and believers. And so for me to have breakfast with them, honestly, is one of the greatest gifts of life. And I'm flying this Wednesday, so I'm going to miss that tremendously. But having them around just fed me emotionally in a way that nothing else can. So put emotional/relational in there. Also feed yourself creatively. I think that's important. A lot of us, especially leaders, we tend to only think of one part of our brains. I think it's really helpful to switch on the other side. So whether it's reading a chapter of a book, whether it is sketching or doodling, whether it is journaling, whether it's dancing to some music, do something that engages the other side of your brain, because it'll just help you have a fuller sense of your day than just doing like analytical thinking and strategic thinking and all of that.
I guess I want to find out a little bit more about if you wanted to give some tips or, share a little bit with individuals that, let's say, are going through what you're talking about. They're experiencing this sense of deep sadness or, sense of displacement or stuckness, when they're trying to relax, right? And they're recognizing they're not being present. What are some tips that you can share with them that, could help them to get to this place of freedom?
Yes. And some people are ready to go directly to therapy. And so for those folks who are experiencing those kinds of symptoms and, those ways of being, I would say your first step should be try and find a therapist that you can connect with, First of all, think about what it is that you want before you engage with a therapist. And then really interview them and try and find the connection. But try and see if you can, every therapeutic process it's gonna come down to forgiveness anyways and letting go. That's eventually what it does, right? So let's not fool ourselves. Every single one of us in the letting go process and the healing process is gonna have to forgive. The question is it gonna be obvious to you, or is it gonna be hidden in some way, shape, or form, right? And so if you go the more direct route, then the forgiveness is very obvious. Now, I have some practices that I do, and one of them was created by this beautiful lady. Her name is Julia Cameron, and she's actually an artist, and most of us have an artistic side, but it's hidden. And so she talks about something called morning pages. Now, it's morning as in first thing in the morning, but it's also mourning as in grieving something that has been lost. Now, with this particular practice, what we do is first thing in the morning, what do we all do first thing in the morning as we get out of bed? We head to the washroom, right? We do a number one, we maybe do a number two, right? So this particular activity, the way that I've kind of recoined it is thought dumping. We shouldn't keep our pee, we shouldn't keep our poop. It should be dumped, right? And so the thoughts that are first thing in the morning should also be dumped. We should actually not pay too much attention to them, because you'll get caught up in them and they'll cycle you through many rabbit holes. So what I suggest is you make sure you have a journal beside your bed. First thing in the morning, you grab your journal, you grab your pencil, you sit down with your coffee, your tea, your water, whatever it is that you like to do. And now you begin to track your thoughts. I like to pretend that I'm in a little canoe, or even, a bigger boat, and that it's on water. And I might be in a stream, right? And some people refer to this as a stream of consciousness. But now what you're going to do is consciously track your thoughts. And you're pretending you're in the boat. And some mornings, as you write your journal, it's a nice, peaceful, quiet. Your thoughts are slow, they're quiet, they're restful. Some other mornings it feels like it's rushing, and it's almost like Niagara Falls, and you might go over the falls. That's kind of like how agitated, frustrated, whatever, angry you are. But essentially, every single thought that comes into your mind, you quickly jot it down. And it's not sentences. This is not a journal, so it's not like making sense. Every single thought, you track it, and you begin to then sense, okay, this is how I'm feeling. You write all your thoughts until you come to the end of 3 pages. And typically, by the time you get to the end of the 3 pages, your mind is absolutely blank. And so when then you get to this blank space, now you can think clearly. And as you begin to think clearly, you also begin to recognize the thing you want, right? Out of all the jumbles, there's always one thing that kind of comes off the page to you. There might be more than 1 or 2, but then the thing you want. And so the question is, how long do you have to do these journals in order to then activate and actually move towards the thing that you want? So you hold tight. Don't worry about acting the first day. Don't worry about acting the second day. Don't worry about the 6th week. But by the time you do get to the 6th week of doing this, you're like, I've had enough. And
I was just about to say.
Sometimes it's taking a while for us to get there. But that's the point. For some people, you need a while. And for some people, you can move really quickly. But the point is, when we're in that kind of stuck mode, we often can't move. So what this is giving you is time to now begin to contemplate the thing you want. By the time you get to the 6th week, you actually start to move, and you start to decide, okay, this is what I want. This is what I need to do to make it happen. And by the 12th week, it has transformed your mind anyways, this type of journaling. There is a quiet rest, but now you've already started acting. So by the time you get to the 12th week of doing this, everything begins to transition. So that's just one of the activities that I do, but it's quite effective, and you can look it up online and look up Julia Cameron and morning pages, and it's very simple activity that you can do.
No, it sounds great. I think I'll even try it. I don't know if I'll get to 3 pages of writing, but but I think what I'm hearing here is sort of that idea of establishing a morning routine.
Yes.
And not paying too much attention to all the thoughts that flood a person, especially if it's a person that's overthinking a lot or has ruminating thoughts. Not paying too much attention to the thoughts and just dumping them, like you said.
Yes.
And it's and I could see how that could be relieving in a sense, really reducing sort of anxiety, and allowing the person, as you said, to get to the place that they really want to be. What is that thing that they actually want to do or to talk about or to address? And I could see how the dumping could help to pinpoint that specific thing.
Yeah. Some people are also meditators, so I would suggest that if you can focus enough to meditate, then absolutely do that as well. I went through my master's, my undergrad, my PhD, experiencing all the symptoms that I did. I kept them at bay because I always kept busy. And so I could motivate myself. I could push through them. I could just kind of get things done. Whereas some people might not be in that highly motivated, charged kind of personality. So you might be experiencing PTSD or that sense of stuckness or that sense of loss, that sense of grief. A lot of us, and the way that I like to say it to my clients now is the long crying. Think about the wound that many of us receive. And for some of us, it's like a paper clip. For others, it's like a big gash across the chest. But it's the long cry because something has been lost, something has been taken from us. And the thing that has been taken from us is love. The thing that we want to see in all of our relationships is love. And so when we stop the long cry and give ourselves the permission to stop the long cry and to release those people who caused us to cry, then we can focus, and then we find that we actually get started on doing a lot of things that we've been meaning to and desiring to do for a really, really long time.
For individuals out there that are having difficulty with acceptance and acknowledging where they are and living in the present, what are some tips that you could give to them to help them to be able to appreciate where they are now?
Be kind to yourself. I often find folks who are struggling with what's happening right now are often very critical about the what was. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I'm not where I thought I would be, or I made so many mistakes. And so I also offer, be kind to that person back there. You made the best decisions that you could with what you had at the time. And would 30-year-old or 40-year-old or 50 or 60-year-old of you now do the same things that you did when you were 19 or 20 or 25? Probably not. So be gentle and forgiving of back then. Celebrate it for what it was. And there's so much good right now. You are the sum of your experiences. And one thing that I tell people often is the things back then, they inform us. They inform a lot of who we are, but we're not defined by that. Just like sort of a little bit of that moving forward and projecting ahead a little bit. Whatever is coming down there isn't defined by what's happening right now.
So it's sort of like past, present, future, in a sense where you're looking at the past as a way to sort of inform, who you are now, but not letting it have sort of a sense of power over sort of your identity or, what you can be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like that. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our time with you, Robin, but I think we could be here and just talk about this so much more because you've shared so much, with our audience, that sense of being able to accept, who you are as a person, being able to recognize that aging is, a part of life. and being able to live in the present with who you are, and have an appreciation of, I guess, the experiences, the lived experiences that we've had over time. And then sort of the last bit there, sort of talking about being kind, to yourself, and recognizing that you did the best you could do at that time, and sort of using that as a way of thinking about, okay, where am I now and where do I want to be, sort of thing. So,
and always remembering you are the party.
Oh, love that.
You are
love
the party.
that. Yeah. You are the party. Okay, we're going to put that in bold at the end.
From 9 years old to, I want to say, how old would I have been in third year? 21, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So a solid 11 years, 10, 11 years of one path, one picture, one process. All your friends are in medical school or nursing school. Everyone you know is in the medical field.
Yeah.
And you come to the end and you realize, and it's so important for us to take that time to truly be honest with ourselves. Because we need to build a life that we can wake up to every day and say, yes, this is who I want to be. This is where I want to be. And this is how I want to live my life. So many of us are waking up every day into choices that were made for us, or decisions that we think we couldn't change just because we invested so much already. But if you think about it, if I'm at 21 years old and I'm going to be doing a job until 65, I've invested less time now than I will the rest of my life.
Wow, that is such a huge, way of looking at it, right? So, because you're only looking at, oh my God, I've invested 10, 15 years in this, but you're not thinking about sort of the life you're going to live after, know, and just sort of that picture that you put, there with the 65 and that sort of like retirement. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. If I do a detour here for another 2 or 3 years, it's not going to be that huge a difference, right?
Yeah.
That's such a great perspective for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So many of us are looking at the 21 and we're totally missing the fact that you got a solid 44 years left.
Yeah.
So this detour that may shave off or add 5 years to the path that I may want to take, that's definitely when you weigh the balance.
Yeah.
It's not as you're about to spend way more time being unhappy than how much time it will take for you to transition into a path that will bring you 40 years of happiness, even 30 years of happiness. Honestly, even 10 years of happiness can make such a difference in our lives. And so it was terrifying. It was scary. I couldn't even tell my parents vocally. I wrote it in a letter, left it on their bed, and just waited for the aftermath.
Oh gosh, I know Caribbean parents, and again, for them, they've invested in you, Yes. So.
Yeah, and they've invested, and that's such a great point you raised. They've invested in you. They've invested in a story that they want to tell about you. They've invested in that story with their friends, right? Let's look at it. There's a lot of there in this scenario.
Yeah.
What have you invested in your story?
Yeah.
What are you investing in what you are going to tell your friends? Are your friends going to be hearing about how amazing this is and how many lives you're impacting and how happy you are about what you're doing? Or are your friends going to be hearing the parts of the story that says, I'm so burnt out, I'm stressed, I hate my job, I don't want to wake up to it every day? So what's the story you want to tell? Their story is theirs, and it's fine. They're probably gonna be unhappy about it, and that's okay. I think my parents have only just learned what I do, and even how to see it.
Yes.
And if we really like put them on the stand, they'd probably be like, she helps people.
Yeah, basically. No, I get you for sure. And the thing is, and I think that's part of it. Like you're saying that, feeling like because you're unable to maybe necessarily share exactly what it is doesn't mean you shouldn't take the step, right? And I think there's sort of this difference between sort of that one mindset, where you're sort of locked into, this is only what I can do from the Caribbean perspective, right? And sort of, if you have Caribbean parents, they're going to be thinking similarly, right? But then you, again, move into sort of this space where it's a more open mindset. We're like, there's so many opportunities, there's so many things I can do. So now it's like you've gone into the space where you've taken into consideration, not just the community, not just sort of this closed, thing that you have to do, but you're now open to, okay, what's going to make me happy? What, should I do that's going to fulfill my life and, the greater good of the world? It's sort of taken into consideration meaning and purpose. And I could see how that would be scary too, right? Because then it's moved out of sort of survival of, this is what I have to do to survive within this context. Whereas now you're like, I don't have to worry about surviving. Now I can think about meaning and purpose and fulfilling life and being able to give back. And I could see how that will be challenging and even more difficult to explain to Caribbean parents who are also within sort of that closed mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. You're hitting right on it. And that is what I love about positive psychology, because it's focusing on how can I thrive in my life? How can I have more positive emotions? How can I build better relationships? How can I live with meaning and purpose and achievement? How can I love what I do so much that I don't even see time flying by? I'm so lost in the work that I'm doing. It's bringing me so much joy, so much pleasure that I'm able to show up in my life. And by showing up in my life, I get to help others show up in theirs as well. And not just the cultural factor, but generational differences. When we think about, parents, my generation above, like I'm right on the crux of millennials, on that millennial shift. So I definitely can understand and appreciate the necessity of survival that our parents had to do, and why it's become so difficult for them to see a world where I can make a choice that doesn't necessarily always bring the most money or is the most stable.
The truth.
Right? Like I can make a choice. I said the other day, and someone was like, that's so crazy. I said, listen, I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, don't pay me in pennies, pay me in purpose. And I'm not saying that I'm not doing my job, because I need to pay bills. I need to sustain my life. But we're at a stage in life where it's more than just doing a job because it pays me well. Doing that job requires me to love that job, or to be able to see how that job changes other people's life. Because the way I look at the work that we do, I look at it as an assignment. You're literally there with a particular purpose. It doesn't matter what your job is. There's this research that was done the other day, or I don't know, I was listening to it on a podcast or something, and they were talking about the janitor at NASA, who he loved his work so much. And fact check me, anybody, if you know what this is. He loved his work so much because he saw that keeping NASA clean was an active part of getting a man on the moon.
Of course, every little part works, right? Yes.
Right? Like his job was so important. So when he went to work every day, he wasn't going to work to keep the floors clean or to keep the washrooms clean or whatever else he did. He was going to work to play his part in getting a man on the moon.
It's all about the way that you think about it, all about thinking about what role are you playing, in this grand scheme of things. And his why was getting a man on the moon, and he's playing his part as a janitor. It's amazing.
And so if we're just going into jobs because this is stable, or my parents wanted me to do this, or this makes sense, we miss the overall assignment. Rather than approaching our work, approaching our choices, approaching our decisions with, how am I on assignment here? What is the assignment here? What am I fulfilling here? Because if we're approaching it that way, we also know when it's time for us to move on. We also know when it's time for us to move to another assignment. When I'm raising a 5-year-old, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I know the constant question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And that be, what do you want to be, always ends up in a career, right? I think the bigger question is, who do I want to be when I grow up, right? Who do I want to be? Because once I know who I want to be, then I'll be able to leave myself open to satisfy that with a job. So that rather than growing up to do a job becomes a part of who I'm growing up to be. That becomes one way.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, my job becomes one way I get to fulfill who I am. So who I am isn't defined by what I do. What I do is a part of who I am. So like reversing the psychology on that question. So who do I want to be when I grow up? I want to be someone who impacts other people's lives.
Yes.
What's it gonna take for me to do that? Not, I want to be a doctor. Nah, a doctor can impact lives. How does a doctor impact lives, right? Is that the way I want to impact lives? Is it being a teacher? Is it being a janitor? Is it being whatever, right? That one part of my life. We are multifaceted. Our minds, our bodies, our souls, our relationships, our jobs. Those are all parts of who we are. But I find we spend so much time picking the career and not enough time deciding who I want to be. So that I am fulfilling that in my job.